All right, hey everybody, we are back for part two of elections. This should just be one presentation here. You can see there's 7 slides, but this slide and there's 2 slides with images on them, so there's really only 5 slides, or sorry, 4 slides with note-taking information on. So it's all about the Electoral College today. So let's know why we have it. The Electoral College is there. The primary reason outlined, the issues outlined in Federalist 10, it's an element of defense against Madison's tyranny of the majority. Remember, the framers put only one thing in the hands of the majority, and they did that on purpose, right, to prevent the tyranny of the majority. So we do not have the majority able to take your things away or deprive you of your property just because of a majority vote. It's the entire reason for, or the entire issue of tyranny of the majority. They also did at that time, it was 1787. The electors were chosen by the voters, and then they wanted them to have knowledge, but that quickly went away to just being the electors there for the state's majority vote in most cases. Remember, the popular vote is represented in the House already, and the legislature was the most important thing to them anyway. The president was not. The president, remember, we talked about this in Unit 2, the president is far more powerful than any of the framers ever thought they would ever be. So the election of a president was not as big of a deal to them as was the legislature, which is where the popular vote is represented in the House. It is then again another element of federalism. What you see today, and it always comes up, after elections and things like that. So the element of federalism, the power to choose a president, is dispersed through the states. What you see now, one of the primary things you'll see as people who think the Electoral College needs to go, is they'll say, oh, it's an element that was put in place to keep the power of the slave states, which is ridiculous. It's to keep the power, or it's to allow the small states, just like the Senate being equal in representation. So the small states would actually join. Okay, and so the small states, it's the small states at this time. In addition to some southern states, are New Hampshire, it is New Jersey, it is Connecticut, it is Rhode Island. None of those are slave states, but they are also the beneficiaries of this electoral college system. So it's not this, okay, whatever New York, Virginia, and Massachusetts want, and that'll be that. That's why the system is in place. It's not in place for the arguments that are used today against the Electoral College. It is there. It is not a democratic institution. Okay, it is anti-democratic, and it's meant to be, just like our federalism system is meant to be. All right, a little bit more then. Let's talk about the mechanics of it, how it works, right? Each state gets a total of their congressional delegation, which you add up how many representatives they have and how many senators they have. That's how many electoral votes you get. Georgia has 14 representatives, so Georgia gets 16 electoral votes. Washington, D.C., as a result of the 23rd Amendment, gets 3 electoral votes. Washington, D.C. is not a state. Okay, the Electoral College says, or the Constitution says, states get Electoral College votes, and DC didn't get that. Apparently, enough states decided to ratify that. 3/4 were taken in the 20th century to allow Washington, D.C. to have 3. But still, they are not a state, and they're not a state on purpose. Okay, so the total Electoral College is 538. So 435 representatives, 100 senators, plus 3 for D.C. adds to 538. And of course, it takes a majority to be president. A majority of that is 270 or more. Okay, it is theoretically possible to only have 2 candidates and still not have a majority. They can tie at 269 each. So that is a theoretical possibility. All right. So the minimum then, of course, for each state is 3, because each state has at least 1 representative, and of course each state has 2 senators. So 3 is the minimum electoral votes a state can have. And remember, we talked about this back in Unit 1 about federalism. It does give the small states proportionately slightly more power than would be allowed in the popular vote, which is, again, is one of the reasons for it. Okay, those small states are not going to give that up. Okay, and they got it. It was one of the things that made them, at least in the 13 states time frame, that they joined. That and the Senate is what the small states really liked, and were some of the real reasons they ratified the Constitution, is so they could have some semblance of not being run over by the majority. All right, a little bit more then. States are responsible for determining how their electoral votes are allocated. They can do it however they wish. Um, it just so happens that 48 states in Washington, D.C. use the winner-take-all system. The highest vote total in the state wins. Could be a majority, could be a plurality. Doesn't matter. So if there's 3 people running, then whoever gets the most gets all the electoral votes. Whoever wins Georgia, whoever gets the most in Georgia, gets all 16 of Georgia's electoral votes. California, they get all 55 of theirs. Okay, so let's talk about the two. I mentioned them before, probably a long time ago. Maine and Nebraska use what's called a congressional district method. And what that means is whoever wins each congressional district in and of itself gets 1 electoral vote, and then the 2 Senate votes that are left over are allocated to the overall state winner. So Nebraska and Maine can divide theirs up, and usually they do. And both Maine and Nebraska had theirs divided up this year. Maine is usually more regularly divided up, where a Republican will get 1 of those electoral votes. In Nebraska, when it's divided up, a Democrat will get 1 of those electoral votes. You'll see that on the electoral map here in 2016. You see, so 232 for Clinton, 306 for Trump. You can see up in the upper right corner, Maine, Congressional District 2. That's a single vote. That's red. That President Trump won that congressional district. The overall winner of the state was, in this case, Clinton. So she got the other congressional district. There's only 2. And then she won the state overall, so she got the 2 Senate votes. That's why it's 3-1 there. In this election, Nebraska, you can see Nebraska right there in the middle. Nebraska has 5. They did not split that time. Our President Trump at that time won all of the electoral votes out of Nebraska. So the next map then is 2020. Actually, the same count, just flipped the other way. 306 for Biden, 232 for Trump. And you can see this is a cartogram, which is kind of fun too, because you can see the states in their relative size for how many electoral votes they have. So you can see again in the upper right corner, Maine has 1, so Trump won Maine District 2 again. And then you can see also, though, in Nebraska there, that little blue square where Biden won the area, the congressional district that has the city of Omaha in it. That's where he won. That's the one Democrats win if they win a congressional district in Georgia. That's the one they win. So one more slide, and we'll talk about what happens when nobody gets a majority momentarily. So the electors meet each December. We just saw that happen a couple months ago. The results are sent to the Senate. The vice president, who is the president of the Senate, reports the results to the joint session when the congressional session begins. So in 2000, it led to something a little bit awkward. The vice president was Al Gore. He was also a candidate for president for the Democrats, and he had to stand in front of the Senate and open everything up and say, yeah, I lost. Kind of interesting. Pence was in slightly a different position, but he was the VP, so Pence was the VP this time around. He had to open up and say, yes, Biden-Harris beat Trump, Pence. Okay, so sometimes that happens. Here's the last part of this, the mechanics part. What if there's no majority? And it has happened twice. It happened in 1800. It happened for Jefferson and Aaron Burr. But it does go to the House of Representatives then. So if nobody gets an electoral college majority, then it goes to the House, and the House will decide between the top three electoral vote getting candidates, if there happen to be 3. In 1800, there were only 2. It took 36 ballots, 36 different votes in the House for Jefferson to defeat Burr. The system slightly changed after that because Burr was running to be Jefferson's vice president. But the way the Electoral College allocated them, they didn't separate those votes. So that's why Jefferson and Burr tied. Once that election was over, the 12th Amendment changed things, and Now it is one set of electoral votes for president and one set for vice president, so that can't happen again, the exact thing that happened in 1800. But there was still not a majority of electoral votes in 1824. Four people got electoral votes, so the top three vote getters went to the House, and it took one ballot for John Quincy Adams to defeat Andrew Jackson and William Crawford. That was, if you remember U.S. history, that was the election that the Jackson people said was a corrupt bargain and all of that. But that's the last time it happened, was in 1824. So let's just talk about how that happens. So it's not, the House doesn't just meet and go, okay, vote, okay, and like they do on legislation, so the majority wins. No, that's not how it works. Each state delegation gets one vote. Georgia gets one vote. If it were to happen now, California gets one vote, and New York gets one vote, and Illinois gets one vote, what have you. So how did they decide? They vote inside their congressional delegation. So Georgia's congressional delegation will get together and say, who are you going to vote for? And they'll take a little vote, and so essentially the winner of that vote is who gets the vote. Well, if that were to happen today, there are 14 representatives from Georgia, 8 Republicans and 6 Democrats. So Georgia's vote will go, if this were to happen right now, of course it's not, Georgia would cast one vote for the Republican candidate. The person who gets a majority of those votes wins. So each state single vote. Now, there could be something, what if one of those Republicans decided to vote for the Democratic candidate? Or what if it was 7-7? Or other states are tied, things like that. Well, what happens if there's a tie? That state doesn't get a vote. State delegations which tie don't get a vote. So it's either a yay for one, a yay for the other, or sorry, you tied, so you don't get a vote. So that wouldn't count towards the majority. And then of course the majority of that wins. So that's the Electoral College. A little bit more depth than we've done before. This is the end of the elections portion. So we'll pick back up with campaigns and campaign finance. That'll be the last part of this unit before spring break. You do have an assignment. It's assignment's a touch longer this time, so you'll have that today as well. So I will see you on Friday with another lecture and more work. So hang in there until then.